Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, a special bonus episode. And for this bonus episode, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to cover a few movies here, at least two. I think two that we know of. Now, as always, I'm John Negroni, you know me, film editor for In Between Drafts and your second favorite co-host of the Cinemaholics podcast. But, of course, we have to bring on your third favorite co-host of Cinemaholics. He is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's Will Ashton.
What up, what up?
Will Ashton, what are we talking about this? Well, not this week, because we already had our anniversary episode. It ain't Cinemaholics, till Cinemaholics. But this is where we actually talk about the movies.
Yeah, so we have, like you said, we didn't review anything in this most recent episode, even though we have plenty of films we have both seen and could review.
Yeah, it literally was like the week where I think the most amount of movies came out.
Yes, or at least one of the weeks, yeah. But two of the most high-profile films that have just come out in the last week or two that we have both seen are Rian Johnson's Glass Onion, a Knives Out Mystery. I believe that's the subtitle.
That's correct. You nailed it.
And then the second film we're going to be discussing is Steven Spielberg's Fabelmans.
Yeah, two very different movies, of course, but we had to narrow it down somehow. Now, plenty of other movies we could have talked about that we both. Well, actually, not that we both have seen, because you haven't seen Strange World, the latest Disney movie. And I don't know if you still plan to anytime soon. I mean, it's probably going to be on Disney Plus by the end of this sentence. But yeah, Strange World, big Disney movie in theory,
sure,
but a huge box office bomb, as it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it seems like a decent number of recent films have not taken the box office by storm. Yeah, including the Fabelmans. Yeah,
the Fabelmans, which released on a decent amount of theaters. I mean, not super wide, but the theaters that it did pop up in, I don't think it really took off. But I think the difference is the Fabelmans has award season kind of at its wings, because it's the kind of movie where you do that slow rollout. Yeah, okay, you don't expect it to make that much the opening weekend, but it's probably going to be in theaters until going through February because of the Oscars and all that. And it's pretty much, I think, going to be a shoo-in for some nominations at least.
That would be the plan, except that Universal, I believe, today announced that they're going to be putting it on VOD and then shortly thereafter on Peacock starting in December.
I did see that, but they did that last award season too, and they still put the stuff in theaters because it still has that boost. I think because a lot of people still want to go to the theater, and because, I mean, who do you know that has a Peacock account? Not me.
That is true. I guess that did kind of play to Halloween Kills' favor last year, where everyone was kind of freaking out, like, oh, is this going to hurt its box office? And it didn't seemingly at all. I don't know how Halloween Ends did, but
because I think that's the thing. These are the kinds of movies where, I mean, not Halloween Kills necessarily, but I know that these award season movies tend to appeal to an older demographic, a demographic that doesn't do streaming as much. A lot of them haven't even cut the cable cord. A lot of them are still going to the theater because going to the theater is a fun thing to do. Go with your spouse, your partner, your buddy, or whatever. And if Fabelmans does kind of suit that. Strange World is a totally different story. Strange World is like, you got your opening weekend, and if it's not popping off, I mean, you're gonna do the Encanto thing. You're gonna be, I mean, people pretend like Encanto was like this big success. It wasn't. Encanto made very little in theaters. It didn't start to gain some momentum, some buzz, and pop culture impact until it hit Disney Plus. So I don't think that's going to happen with Strange World necessarily, because Strange World is very strange as a Disney movie. I think it's going to be relegated forever to the pantheon of Disney's forgotten action blockbuster movies that they've tried many times to get right in the past. In terms of get right, strike a chord with audiences and be a big success. Every time they try to cater more to boys and preteens, they try to do things like Atlantis, Treasure Planet. It doesn't tend to work very well. But, they do have Tarzan. So that's it.
They do have Tarzan, I suppose. That is true.
And Princess and the Frog. And I was kidding. But Wreck-It Ralph, Wreck-It Ralph is actually one of the exceptions in terms of
male
catering to boys.
Yeah.
Teenage boys. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because if you're looking at Treasure Planet, I think you already mentioned, but Atlantis and Chicken Run, they're kind of more boy-centric films, which a lot of them, not to generalize, but a lot of the more male-centric animated Disney films of the 21st century have been lesser than some of the more female-led films. Like you said, with the exception of Wreck-It Ralph. And I would say to some extent Atlantis, which is a film I would vouch for, as well as Emperor's New Groove, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. Can't leave out Emperor's New Groove. But anyway, it is kind of weird, that we're not talking about the big Disney movie. But I mean, I have seen it, and I think it's pretty mediocre, honestly. I wasn't a huge fan of Strange World, and you haven't seen it, and I certainly wasn't like pushing you, like nudging you, like, oh, Will, please, we gotta for the podcast. I mean, it really, considering the breadth of everything else we could cover, it just seems pretty low on my list of like interesting conversations. Like, it's a pretty cut and dry kind of situation where, yeah, I mean, if you watch the trailer and you're really interested, if you're just like ride or die for Disney, then just go check it out, whatever. But yeah, it's not one that I think we need to dissect. Now, there are all manner of movies that I've been watching lately. My brain's a little fried, Will, with all these screeners. And I still have plenty to go. I mean, I got White Noise and Pinocchio, and man, I can't even keep this stuff straight. Yeah, I know you want me to watch Armageddon Time before, the year ends, I guess. Lots of stuff. But I know one that you and I have seen that we're probably going to talk about on maybe the next episode of the show, or one of the next bonuses, is After Sun, the A24 film. That's coming up. I do want to talk about that.
Coming up, I believe it's already in theaters, or at least I saw in theaters.
No, I mean coming up, like our episode.
Oh, I see. Yes. No, we have both seen that. We've also both seen Women Talking.
Mm-hmm. Which I don't know if I even want to. I'm not writing a review for Women Talking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's worth discussing, I think. Should we just do one with that and She Said, just to kind of add to our confusion to these two Plan B,
do we have to?
Movies that have very similar titles?
Listeners, write in if you are aching for John and Will to talk about She Said and Women Talking. I just feel so uncomfortable because they're just kind of these movies that I feel like are kind of out of our wheelhouse. There's a couple of guys here, but
always,
obviously we could bring on a guest.
Yeah, we could always bring on a guest. There's nothing in the rule book that says we can't have a guest.
Yeah, or just do a ladies' night episode. That's always fun. That said, I do want to talk about Lady Chatterley's Lover at some point. The Netflix movie. I did see that.
Oh yeah, that comes out on Netflix this Friday, right? Might already be on Netflix by the time this episode comes out.
That's true. Well, it depends on when we're able to get this out, but we'll see. Lots of stuff coming up. Lots of stuff. I know we got to talk about The Whale. Hopefully we can talk about Bones and All at some point. You were going to watch it, but things didn't work out for reasons. And Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I mean, December is going to be a month. There's some stuff we got to get to.
Sure. Yeah, I don't even know where you land on Puss in Boots. I have an idea where you land on Bones and All and The Whale, but
I feel like I talked to you about Puss in Boots a little bit.
A little bit. You were being critical of the beginning of the film, but it kind of.
Well, no, I think I told you. Look, the critics are coming out and acting like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is like this big achievement in animated movie history or something. I'm seeing like A's and A pluses, and I'm like, guys, no, it's not that good. It's okay. It has its moments, sure.
I think
but this is coming from a Puss in Boots despiser, as many people know.
A denier of Puss in Boots, I guess you could say.
It's true.
I saw IGN.
I'm not a fan of that character.
Yeah, when you can hear all about that on the most recent episode of Ain't Ogre, So It's Ogre, which has John on as a guest star.
Very true. Very true.
But in any case, I think it was IGN that had their, I believe, 9 out of 10 review for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Which I think is just bonkers. But you know what? More power to people. To me, that is not a 9 out of 10 movie at all. It's a 7. It's just good. But it's a 7, maybe a 7.5. You catch me on a good day.
What I was going to say though is that they were quoted as saying that is the Logan of the Shrek franchise, which very much entices my interest.
I swear, you just add a little bit of existential dread to a movie. It can be the most surface level, superficial addition to your script, and people act like you have just cracked the screenwriting code. I don't get it. If you get it, please explain it, because I'm in the wilderness here. But,
yeah, you just add some existential dread to your family-friendly movie, and middle-aged critics around the world just
They're gonna lose
flock to it. Yeah.
It's like adding a grief metaphor to your horror movie. It's like, oh, now it's elevated horror because, grief. It's allegory.
Or some sort of parental allegory for a Pixar movie, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very much so. You know what's good about those with the Pixar movies, though? The sort of the mentorship thing. I think the reason that works so consistently is because it is innate to the story in a way that, I don't know, it's easy to relate to. Like Finding Nemo. You have Marlin, got a little fish as his son, and that movie kind of nails the metaphor without like having to like use a bunch of indulgent symbols, And I don't know. I think like Woody and Buzz, competing for a child's heart, the space age and all that. That's a really good metaphor because it rings true. But then sometimes I see these horror movies where it's like, all right, the message is that she is upset that her husband died. And now a ghost is trying to kill her and she misses her husband. And it's so sloppy. Like it's that kind of stuff that kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's like, it's just adding it's like shoehorning the message instead of like really building it from the ground up. Midsummer does it right because Midsummer is like, it's about a breakup. And that's where the metaphor, you can't just take the metaphor out because that's the movie. And sometimes I see these other like so-called elevated horror movies and you take the allegory out and the movie's functionally the same. So that's my little litmus test.
Well, on that note, should we talk about one of these movies or keep stalling?
We gotta peel some layers to a different topic.
Sure.
Right?
Gotta murder a few other hearts or something. I don't know.
Murder a few other hearts?
I don't know, man. I just want to move on to Glass Onion.
Glass Onion? Oh, that's a great idea. Well, why didn't you say so? Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, new film from Rian Johnson. We love Rian Johnson over here on the Cinemaholics podcast. We've been shouting his praises one movie after another. I think it's been 2 movies now since we started Cinemaholics. Of course, Star Wars The Last Jedi. I think that was our first Star Wars movie review that you and I did on Cinemaholics.
One of our most popular episodes?
Of that era, for sure.
Okay.
I think we have since, grown past the Last Jedi sort of download sphere, I think. But that was a successful episode. We had a great conversation, of course. Maverick Hines, former co-host of the show.
R.I.P.
And we also talked about Knives Out a couple years back in 2019.
Yeah. Was that in the Abby years or is that before Abby?
That was way before Abby. It was a year before.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that was just you and me. And I don't even remember if we did if we had a special guest. I'll double check. But this, of course, Glass Onion is the sequel to Knives Out.
Yes, which, Knives Out was a Lionsgate release.
Big success.
Well exceeded their expectations. It was like a mid-budget film, I believe, in the $30 to $40 million range budget-wise. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less.
It's a lean movie, yeah.
It made well over $300 million, I think, worldwide. Maybe that's international. I don't remember exactly the numbers. But
yeah, I think you have it right.
It was, coming out this year, at a year, I mean, where I feel like the box office was kind of looking a little bit more hopeful for audiences. Like more original properties, like you said, Midsummer was a great example of such. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Knives Out, Uncut Gems were these kind of smaller to mid-budget films that were really getting great critical and commercial success coming into the popular pop culture awareness and sparking a lot of hope for not only the theater experience, but for cinema at large. And then obviously, not long after 2019, we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been causing quite a bit of doubt for the state of movies as it is, which makes it a kind of interesting turn of events that Netflix decided to foot the bill for Knives Out 2 and 3.
You know how much they paid for it?
Wasn't it like $400
million? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of split between what they estimated the movies would cost and then what they're paying Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I don't get it personally because that amount of money, that is an insane amount of money. And it makes sense if you're planning to do like a wide theatrical release of these movies. Well, now it looks like after Glass Onion did really well in only a handful of theaters in a week where it had a lot of competition, and it was one of the few success stories in a per theater average. Now Netflix is, of course, looking at, oh yeah, maybe we'll do another theatrical rollout, even though it's going to be on Netflix too. And that'll be interesting to see how it's going to perform when it's also going to be on Netflix. I don't get it. Why Netflix? Why would Netflix pay that much? Amazon, I 100% understand. Amazon has a very solid, consistent business model with this sort of thing. It releases these movies in theaters, usually a balance between wide and limited release, and then it puts it on its streaming service like 6 months later. And like, it's this thing that I just think that these streaming services, in their efforts to sort of amplify and market their streaming services above theaters, which theaters are a proven business model, at least in the sense where you're in the zone of actually getting a return on your budgets. You don't always do better than break even, but there is like a consistency there. Whereas with like streaming, who's getting Netflix? Who's buying a Netflix subscription because of Knives Out? Who is like looking at their Netflix and being like, well, I was going to turn off my subscription, but then I saw Knives Out is on there. It makes no sense to me at all.
Well, by Netflix standards, is it more about getting new subscribers or sustaining subscribers?
Well, it's theoretically both, but that's the thing. It's like Knives Out isn't going to keep you on the service. Who is looking at Knives Out? Because like Knives Out isn't that big. And even if it is, it's not going to have, it's a proven success story in theaters. How is it a proven success story? Like, just license it for Netflix. Like, they just put Where the Crawdads Sing on Netflix. I honestly I just don't get it. Like, it's annoying because I think like what it's leading to is like the studios continuing to learn the wrong lessons from movies and how they're doing at the box office, and for the streaming wars to continue just being this ridiculous like competition between the execs who are pumping up the streaming services and the execs who do still believe in the theatrical model to whatever extent. And I guess what I'm getting at is we keep training people to not go to the theater because we're like, it's just going to be on Netflix. It's just going to be on Disney Plus. That's a huge reason why Strange World isn't doing anything right now. Like, who's going to watch Strange World? Who is going to watch Encanto? People know it's coming like in a couple of weeks. And so, like, I guess it's bumming me out because they're going to start losing money eventually. If they aren't already, they probably already are. And it means like fewer good movies are going to get made. Period. End of story. And so, like, I want more movies like Glass Onion to come out. Glass Onion's a good movie. My audience enjoyed it a good, decent bit. But I tell you what, Will Ashton, do you look at the future of movies and say like, oh yeah, we're probably going to get another Glass Onion, fairly regularly? I doubt it.
Well, we're getting at least one more. I know that's true.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, good point. And then after that.
But after that, I don't know. I mean, I know Rian Johnson said he would continue making them. It seems like Daniel Craig is fine with making more of them. I don't know if Netflix is going to foot the bill for more of them, because I think what you're suggesting is that it's hard to figure out exactly what the end goal is for Netflix. Because I was reading about, there's an article this week from Variety that kind of broke down the theatrical rollout and what Netflix was kind of expecting from the film, and how there's this sort of like this internal conflict in the company, as well as some conflict with the theater executives.
No kidding.
Yeah, because it seems like it's weird because they struck a deal with a lot of the main theater chains, in this case being like Cinemark, Regal Cinemas, and AMC's, if I'm recalling correctly. And normally, Netflix movies do not go to those chain theaters. They usually, if they do go to theaters, they play in independent theaters or independent chains, because theaters
or regional chains,
right? Because AMC and nationwide theater chains like those have been very vocal about, like, we don't like Netflix. Netflix we see as the death of our company. Like, we feel like if we start integrating Netflix movies into our theaters, people are going to be less inclined to want to go see movies at our theater and just wait for them to go to Netflix. And I think...
Yeah, can I say, put yourself in the shoes of a distributor. I know you work at a theater these days. Like, like the decision-making process for this. Think about it for a second. If I run a theater and you are Netflix trying to tell me that I need to put these 2 screens, this valuable real estate, put your big Netflix movie on there, when I could be putting 2 other movies that are not Netflix affiliated, you're telling me to risk how much money I'm going to make as a theater that weekend because I'm putting in 2 movies that people might not show up to see because they know it's going to be on Netflix. That's your branding identity. And I think sometimes Netflix throws their weight around not really understanding how a lot of theater owners can't take risks like that, because risks like that are kind of dumb. They're not all going to work out like Glass Onion, I don't think.
Well, I think at the very least with this one, not to throw Netflix too many bones, but I think they were a little bit smarter in the sense that they did realize that, A, we can't just put this movie in theaters 2 weeks before it's going to go on Netflix. Like, it gave it like a month between its, theatrical release, just 1 week run, and when it's going to be on Netflix, which I believe is December 23rd, only a few days before Christmas. So they gave it a healthy window before its streaming release, and I believe they said they would give most of the profits, or a healthy share of the profits, to the theater as opposed to Netflix taking that money in. So I guess that was enough of an incentive for the theaters to want to play it. Also knowing that this would be, a fairly crowd-pleasing film, considering the success of the first movie and how much goodwill has continued to garner since its theatrical release.
That's what makes it the exception, right? Is that Knives Out is the brand that is going to overshadow the Netflix brand. Because people know that Knives Out is a thing that exists outside of Netflix. This is not something they could have gotten away with for something like, I don't know, Project Power. Like, of course not. But in terms of Knives Out, you do have some of that existing IP to like make people think like, oh, I saw the last Knives Out in theaters. Sure.
And I think from Netflix standpoint, outside of just being, from a really talented up and coming filmmaker, if Rian Johnson even is considered up and coming, I think he's pretty well established at this point. But, from their
he's a seasoned filmmaker. He's been making films since the late 2000s.
But from their standpoint, not only is Knives Out a trusted brand such as it is at this point, but there is the promise with a film like Glass Onion where it's like it's old and new again. Like, you're going to get the format that was established with the original Knives Out movie, but you also are going to get something new. It's a totally new cast, totally new band of characters, and the opportunity for a totally new cast of A-list stars. And
I just imagine the person though walking into Glass Onion and being like, all right, this is the one where they go to like the Death on the Nile, right? And it's Hercule Poirot, right? Okay, my joke is that...
Yeah, I get you.
We, of course, had this movie already, sort of. We had Death on the Nile, which is kind of the same format, isn't it? I mean, it's the same detective, but it's a different cast of characters and a new mystery. And, of course, this is like an Agatha Christie thing that's existed long before Rian Johnson was doing his own sort of modern whodunit.
Yeah, but, I mean, the weird thing about... So, in the broad sense, like the term... in terms of star power in movies right now, there's this kind of weird thing where, like, there's no... This is the big thing that Quentin Tarantino got in trouble for saying, which is basically true, which is that there aren't really movie stars anymore. They're, like, movie characters that people go see. Like, they don't go see a Chris Evans movies. They go see Captain America movies. Right. Or, they don't go see Robert Downey Jr. movies. They go see Iron Man movies.
There was a conversation online about this in terms of like Hancock was like one of the last sort of like hugely successul blockbusters that was primarily built on A-list talent.
I mean,
it kind of marks the end of that era.
Yeah. I mean, the like two last big movie stars I guess we have at this point are Tom Cruise and Denzel Washington. And Tom Cruise is primarily doing IP stuff, like it's Mission Impossible and most recently Top Gun. And then Denzel Washington, like even some of his more recent star vehicles haven't been doing as well as the ones that came out
I'm not
previously.
sure if I buy that he's like, that kind of sort of people will just show up to the theater in the hundreds of millions.
I mean, at one point, that was certainly the case. I mean, even if that was 5 or 10 years ago, that was the case.
Was it? I mean, I'm looking at like Roman J. Israel. I'm looking at Fences. And
well, that's when things kind of took a turn. But if you're looking at like Flight and like movies even going back to like 2012 to 2014.
Well, I mean, you can say the same thing about Tom Hanks then.
I guess so. Yeah.
You're kind of opening it up there. But I get what you're saying. But yeah, if we narrow it down a little bit more to like the action IP, which yes, Tom Cruise 100%, is basically the last vestige of that. And Will Smith kind of veered off of that after Hancock because things like After Earth came out, and he started doing projects that were just built different, I guess. But yeah, we're in a different era.
Anyway, what I was trying to lead up to is that I feel like Netflix strategy for this has been kind of interesting, where they do seem to be kind of putting their chips on certain stars, like Adam Sandler. Like they're just like, people seem to, if they see Adam Sandler on the banner, they're probably going to click it even if they don't watch the whole thing.
Right.
So they put a lot of
and they're using him for both their like mass appeal stuff and their award stuff. Right. Hustle. Yeah. They won't shut up about Hustle for the for your consideration crowd. Yeah.
But on the other side of it is like the Don't Look Up approach, which is just like, what if a movie didn't have just one star, but all the stars? Like every star you can think of, and they're all just here on this thing. Just click this button, and you'll get to see all these stars in this movie. And I feel like Glass Onion, and subsequently Knives Out as a franchise, kind of leads into that really well. And I think that might have gone into their decision making, where it's just like, it's not only appealing in the sense that they can advertise like, we have a new Knives Out movie, it's all this stuff, but it's like, look at all these stars we got for this movie. We got Edward Norton, we got Kate Hudson, we got Leslie Odom Jr., we got Janelle Monáe. We got all these people, and you can see them all, having fun. Dave Bautista, all these people just at the click of a button. Or in this case,
but they're not like, oh my gosh, Dave Bautista. They're like, oh my gosh, Drax.
Sure. But does that make sense? Do you think that could
It makes sense, and I'm glad you brought up Don't Look Up. I was going to bring it up too, in terms of like, that is an example of when Netflix did release one of these kinds of movies. In that case, it was, this is the next thing from Adam McKay. Whoa. And they did release it in some theaters, not a lot, but they released it in some theaters last December. It was playing it in AMC in like my area last year, actually. I don't think it was playing at the Regal, so I don't think they had to deal with Regal at that point.
I was going to say, it didn't play at any of the chain theaters, but it played at like 5 or 6 theaters. It played at AMC. Did it?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Okay, it didn't play in any AMCs near me. I know that.
It didn't play at all the AMCs. That's the thing. I think it played at like some of them. I think because of the Bay Area, it probably was in like some theaters like that in like New York. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I can't say I know anything about that, but I still locally, the only movie it played in several theaters, certainly more so than Glass Onion, but they're all either independent theaters or in like regional chains. It didn't go to any of the major nationwide chains, and I remember this is pretty notable, Glass Onion, for that particular reason.
I mean, it's not true, because it was at the AMC in Livermore, California. I remember it was at the AMC in San Jose. I saw it at an AMC. It was, but maybe just like it wasn't nationwide. I doubt.
Okay,
but how much money it made, Washington.
Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
I have no idea, because Netflix doesn't release their numbers.
That's right. Exactly. So there's no domestic total. So we don't know how much it made in the US. We do know internationally, because they played it, they had to report the numbers for some of like the different territories they did in parts of Europe and parts of Asia. We don't even know all the international totals, but it didn't break 1 million worldwide. But that's just the official total. We don't know. So that kind of tells you how hesitant they are with this kind of release format, this kind of scheduling thing, to what you're saying.
Yeah, and then that kind of goes back to that Variety article, because that's kind of the push and pull with the theater chains. Like, not only were they like, please let us play it longer than a week, like we know it's going to do well, let us play it more. They were like, no, sorry. But they were like, okay, we're going to put it as many of our theaters as possible, given the limit. I think they cut it off at 600, but like, we'll play as many screenings as possible because we're going to get the most money from this and it's going to do well. But they couldn't advertise it really. Like, for some reason, Netflix prevented them from being like, hey, these theaters have these movies. They just kind of had to like let them roll out as far as that exclusive theatrical release, where they're more preoccupied apparently with kind of building up word of mouth with these screenings than actually making a profit, which is where things get a little confusing. And
it's the first time I'd ever seen like our local Regal theater, because our local Regal was playing this in the East Bay, like Oakland and all of that. And they were playing this at 9 a.m. I've never seen that Regal play anything that early before. Usually the first show times are like past 10:30. So yeah, that kind of tells you they were gearing up for this because they knew it was a holiday week.
Yeah.
And, you know, this was the kind of movie that would play pretty well with people who were, you know, taking a few days off for the holiday, for Thanksgiving.
And not only, I mean, it is also worth noting that this is not a short film. This is like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So if they put, like, they can only really show it on like a particular screen for what? If they try to get as many screens as possible, maybe like 3 times max on one screening?
Well,
maybe.
That depends, right?
Yeah.
Of like earliest to latest, because I saw that they also had midnight showings too.
Oh, really?
So I think they were literally playing this like round the clock. I think like between maybe 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. it was not playing, but otherwise rest of the day on multiple screens.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of tells you too, right? Because like it makes sense. The only big movie out right now is Wakanda Forever, which that's going to be taking up your like your Dolby Atmos screens, your IMAX, like your big show, you know, but you have all these other little screens. I totally get it. Like Glass Onion can like dominate in that respect. Whereas like if you look at Fabelmans, Strange World, The Menu, She Said, like these movies just haven't had a lot of traction. So to me, it makes total sense to bump up and inflate Glass Onion while you have it, right?
Oh, it definitely makes sense. I just that I think the confusion lies with Netflix, where it's just like it seems like because initially the conversation was just like, oh, they didn't know what they had, and it seems like, oh, they did know what they had. They just wanted that exclusivity. They wanted people to
100%, yeah,
not really be able to see it easily and not really know about it until the word of mouth started spreading. And then people are like, oh, that sounds like a really nice movie. I loved the first Knives Out. I want to go see a sequel. It's like, well, you missed it. It was only in theaters for a week. And it's like, oh man, it was like, they'll be on Netflix on December 23rd. So check it out then. And I think that was their grand idea. You know, I don't know if that's for the better or for the worse, but I think, you know,
well, we haven't mentioned this. I do wonder, Will, because I was saying earlier that I don't get it. And I'm like, well, where's your revenue? Where's your monetization? And I think we are headed toward Netflix with ads. That's kind of in the can, isn't it? And so if you do have like an ad format, like it does, you know, then you start to get into like, yeah, actually, I could see this being a thing.
I mean, the funny thing about Netflix is they're like, all right, we got to change up the formula. We're going to put ads in our properties, and instead of things coming out on like a giant dump, like a whole season coming out on one day, we're going to release them one by one on a week and then put ads in between them. It's like, great.
Gee, what does that sound like?
You invented cable television.
Well, that's what I mean. In Hulu, you know, like Hulu has for the longest time been like, yeah, you get Hulu, you get ads, you know, and it's week to week stuff. But like now Hulu has gone even farther, and Hulu just basically has their cable version where you pay like, I think like $70-$80 a month, and you use Hulu like you would DirecTV. You have live TV and you have all that stuff in addition to the streaming stuff. Like what is new is old. What is old is new again. It's
But I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for Netflix in terms of their theatrical release. Like I said, there seems to be some inner turmoil with the company where some people involved, from like what that article detailed, want to really push the theatrical release, primarily because I mean, we talked about this before, but I feel like a movie exists more, quote unquote, if it is in theaters, because it seems more legitimate. It seems like a real movie as opposed to
us.
thumbnail. Well, I mean,
there are a lot of people who like whatever. Like it makes no skin off their back or whatever.
I get that, but I mean, to me, it's like, you know, there's so many movies. They're like, I've heard they're on Netflix. I've even heard some of them pretty good, but it's like the fact they just exist to me as a thumbnail as opposed to an actual thing that I can click on and watch. You know, seems intangible to me. But when you play them in theaters like you did with Glass Onion, it's like, okay, this is a movie. You got the word of mouth out there, and now it's going to be on Netflix. And you don't.
This movie must be good. I have to pay for it.
But yeah, I mean, I think from what I can tell, this is I guess, so far as we can assume, the most profitable Netflix theatrical film since Red Notice, because I think that also went to theaters in some, at least I think in Regal cinemas.
I don't really know how that all panned out, honestly.
I think it played in one of the chains.
News to me.
Yeah. But that one, I guess, did okay. I think Gray Man also went to those cinemas, but I don't think it did as well in theaters. But yeah, select few Netflix movies have actually been creeping their way into the more chain theaters. Of course, there have been other Netflix movies that have gone to theaters. For instance, like Beast of No Nation, I think was like the first one to really get a theatrical rollout. I know Power of the Dog last year got a theatrical rollout because we played at the Harris Theater. I saw Pinocchio recently in a theater. There's been a few others, but The Irishman, of course.
It's definitely way more commonplace than it used to be.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw Irishman in a theater. Yeah. But okay.
Yeah.
That's our review of Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Yeah. Enough business talk. Let's talk about the movie. If we can.
Yeah, and I know, like, we could talk about this all day, I think, because, like, it is an interesting topic, but I do want to make sure not everybody's that interested in it.
I was going to say, it's interesting to me. It's interesting to you. I don't know how interesting it is for someone who clicked on this review wanting to hear our thoughts on the new Rian Johnson film.
Right. And honestly, I want to be careful talking about this movie in general. Maybe that's why I'm, like, subconsciously trying to avoid talking about it, because it is a whodunit. And whodunit movies, mystery movies like this, by nature, you should try to go into it as unfamiliar with the premise and the characters and everything else as much as possible, because discovery is pretty much the most fun thing about these kinds of movies, and kind of following along and being dropped into it, not really knowing what's going to happen, right? And so just from the outset, this is one of those movies, and I think that it's very effective in laying that sort of thing out. And obviously, the second, like, when you rewatch the movie, it's also fun because then you get to rediscover it. And when you know what happens at that point and you have that context, then you can rewatch it and be like, oh yeah, there's a clue, like, right there. I didn't really consider that. Oh, how fun. So stuff like that is pretty cool. Sure. And I know for me, when I rewatched Knives Out, it was even more fun the second time, being able to have that experience. So we are going to talk about Glass Onion, and we're not going to go beyond the trailer, what the trailers kind of give away, but for sure, I'd say that if you're interested in the movie, you know for sure you're going to see it, you want the optimal experience. I do think that, like, listening to us talk about it, you don't need our in-depth review to decide if you want to see it or not. I'd say go see it.
I was going to say, I actually I never saw the trailer for this film, so I don't know what's in the trailer.
I did watch the trailer while I was working on my review for it. My review for it actually isn't out, but it will be out soon. And yeah, I watched the trailer because I wanted to really have, like, a reference for how much does it give away. And it gave away a little bit more than I thought it would, actually. But yeah, we'll keep it real. So, okay. Glass Onion, a Knives Out Mystery. It's less a sequel and more a spinoff, right? It's not connected to the first Knives Out, except for the character of Benoit Blanc in a new situation, a new mystery. But obviously, you could watch this movie without having seen the first Knives Out and be totally fine. You don't need to watch Knives Out to get the most fun out of this movie, in my opinion. I don't know what the first Knives Out would give you, except for just the knowledge that this is a really great detective. But I think that you can kind of tell he's a really great detective from the get-go, because he's in a bathtub and he's hanging out and he says that he's the best detective. That's all I need to know. But the situation here is that a group of sort of like elite people, celebrity influencers, there's one person who's basically been canceled, I guess, and there's this kind of like chemist tech person. They're all sort of like, I guess, avatars for different real life people. So like Kate Hudson plays pretty much like a Kardashian type person. You could put in a bunch of different celebrities there. Leslie Odom Jr. plays this version of kind of like Elon Musk, but not Elon Musk, but like somebody who would work for Elon Musk. There's somebody that I'm forgetting who's like kind of up there, who like actually does the science-y stuff, but he's like a chemist, I guess.
You talking like a Woz type?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Wozniak, of course, like with Apple, not with Apple anymore, but yes, that is much closer to what I'm talking about. Catherine Hahn is kind of like your typical like Hillary Clinton kind of like Democrat liberal. And you also have, who else? Oh yeah, Dave Bautista, who is basically like Joe Rogan. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't be clearer than day who Dave Bautista is channeling there. But then also, I feel like I'm forgetting somebody actually. Well, there is Janelle Monáe, but is there anyone else?
There's Janelle Monáe and there's Whiskey.
It. Huh?
There's Whiskey.
Yeah, but I mean, then we're getting into sort of the supporting. But yeah. Okay. I think I got them all. But
well, there's 5, right? And then there's the. Yeah, I guess that's everybody.
I think that's it. Because we said, Kate Hudson, Dave Bautista, Leslie Odom Jr. Now there is like the head of the group, and he's the Elon Musk kind of character.
The Norton.
Elon Musk, or pick your billionaire, Jeff Bezos, whoever, played by Edward Norton, and he sends this box to all of these friends who know each other. They've known each other for years, and the box contains like all these little puzzles. The whole point is that he's trying to invite them to a murder mystery. And he says that, if you're going to come to my private island, spend time with me, and figure out who is going to be responsible for my murder. And then who else gets a box, but the world's greatest detective, not Batman, but Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig, of course, played the character in the first Knives Out. And he goes on this like little excursion out of boredom, because as it turns out, this movie takes place during May 2020. So this is peak lockdown time in when COVID was really still just kind of like, there was no vaccine, obviously. So like people were still pretty much like scared of it. Nowadays, it's very different. But certainly this movie is harkening back to lockdown, sure. And everybody's sort of like, we could use some, normalcy, is how the Edward Norton character pitches it. So everybody come to my island. He has a way to make sure that they don't have COVID, I guess. They all wave it away. And sure enough, some very interesting things start to go down, particularly when they find out that Janelle Monáe's character has been invited, even though she shouldn't have been, because she is kind of out of the friend group for reasons that are not very clear. But sure enough, when everyone sees her, they're a little bit like, WTF. So, Will Ashton, I know you liked the first Knives Out. I liked the first Knives Out. Good movie. Good time in the theater.
Yeah.
But what did you think of Glass Onion? Do you think this one is worthy? Is it a worthy mystery?
Yeah, I had fun. It was an entertaining little lark. I will say, for me at least, there's been a little bit of debate on this online I've seen. I think, ultimately, this is the lesser of the two films. I think it...
Really?
Yeah. Do you think this one's better?
I think it's just as good.
No, I think it's definitely weaker than the first one. I think that first... And for ways, I think the movie is pretty self-aware of, in the sense that first movie, I think, it's like a well-oiled clock. Or it's like a well-wounded clock. It's like a very, tightly wound screenplay. You can tell Rian Johnson put a lot of thought and concentration to pacing and storytelling of it, making sure everything kind of connected and clicked together in a really entertaining and satisfying way. This one deliberately is a little bit looser. It's a little bit breezier. It's a little bit...
It's purposely
broader.
messier.
Yes, purposely a little bit baggier, in a way that I think in part is kind of to give it kind of more of a loosey-goosey feel, and also I think kind of to adopt it to a Netflix crowd. It's kind of hard to say because we saw it in theaters, but I feel like a lot of the beginning of the film takes a while to kind of set up, the conflict. Like you had mentioned, there's a lot of establishing of like the COVID-ness of the world, which I felt was some of the weakest stuff in the film. I wasn't quite as taken by the acknowledgement that the pandemic is happening. I kind of like the little things. Like you said, there's a fun cameo from a certain star who kind of weighs away the
there are
the
a few fun
fears.
cameos in this.
But that one I thought was the best one, that particular one. I thought there was one Zoom call where I thought the cameos, while two of them were, touching because two of those people aren't with us anymore. I felt like that scene was a little cringy. And I feel like that's kind of the film in a nutshell, is that it kind of walks this very tightrope where it's on the verge of being clever and cringe. And I feel like the first movie was a little bit more adept at narrowing, kind of going through that. In this movie, it's a little bit wobblier about that, especially because like the onlineness is a lot more prevalent in this film. Kind of like you said, these kind of outsized personalities are based on these very branded type of people. And I think it's, still very fun. I think the characters really work together. I think Batista and Janelle Monáe and, of course, Daniel Craig are some of the highlights here. I also think, Edward Norton's having a lot of fun. Kate Hudson's very, very entertaining as well. I kind of wish there was a little bit more with Catherine Hahn and Leslie Odom Jr. I felt like they established them as being prominent characters at the beginning, and then they kind of just did away with them comparatively as the movie went along, with the exception of a few scenes. But I don't know. I thought it was fun. Not, like I said, not as tight as the previous film, but still a good time. And fun little twists and turns throughout.
Yeah, I think what I like the most about this movie, and yeah, I definitely am of the opinion where it is very different from the first Knives Out in a good way, but to me, it's comparable. And one of the reasons, my favorite thing about it, I think, is that it's not just aware of the first one, it's actively trying to be different from the first one. And I like that it is avoiding the same structure. It's avoiding the same sort of, okay, there's been a murder, and now we're going to figure out who did it, and we're going to navigate these characters, and we're going to find out actually, who killed this person very, very early on. Like, that was more of Knives Out. And I think that was what made that movie very special, because it was subverting what you already knew about the murder mystery, whodunit genre. And this movie, I think, is special as well, because it understands that you probably watched the first one, and it's not content as a movie. Rian Johnson was not content to just do Knives Out again. You want to do something different. And I think what elevates this movie a bit over some of its flaws, and I certainly think that like it's not as tight, but I think what really sticks with me for this movie is the message. I think hits a little bit better than the first Knives Out one did. The first Knives Out, it has a good message, it has a good heart to it, and it all comes down to Ana de Armas, and it all comes down to how that character, her story and what she meant to a certain character and all of that. And it was very good in that respect. There was some stuff in that first Knives Out that I thought was a little bit extraneous, a little bit like, okay, this is getting a little bit like nonsensical, sure. But I guess what I really, really liked with this movie is that when it finally got to the end, I didn't love everything about the ending. There's some like stuff that happens where it's very cringy, but still the message lands. And that's what mattered the most to me. And I thought the message was a little bit more interesting. It was a little bit more compelling. It felt like Rian Johnson was getting something off of his chest here. Whereas I feel like Knives Out was him just kind of like having fun. But here I felt like he had like a really distinct purpose behind what he wanted to get across. And it was his commentary on the elite of society, the billionaires of society. And he does it in a way that's so funny. And it's just so like, oh yeah, duh, And it was one of those things where like, I feel like you can watch the movie and feel smart if you catch on to what it's up to. But even if you don't, it's not like the movie is like way too convoluted and contrived to make you feel like, okay, it was just like this out of nowhere, right? I actually think that he did a really good job of like setting up so that you could piece things together yourself. I don't think it's the hardest mystery in the world to solve, to be sure. I don't know about you, Will, but I definitely called a lot of it, pretty much all of it. But still, it wasn't not in a way where I was just like, oh, this is too obvious. But it was a little bit more of like, I hope this is the direction it goes in, because that would be perfect. And that's what I got. So, it could just be one of those things where my particular experience was better because of that. Because I just was a little bit more forgiving of some of the storytelling shortcuts, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that's where kind of the Netflixiness of the film, and I say that in a way that sounds kind of derogatory, but it's actually in this case meant to be kind of more of a compliment, because I think I agree with you in the sense that this movie kind of finds that proper balance that I think most Netflix movies haven't been able to, which is that you can watch it as, you're paying attention, you're in a movie theater, you're enjoying it as a piece of entertainment, as a crowd pleasing experience. But it's also kind of meant to be something a little bit, like I said, breezier, that you can kind of put on the background if you prefer, like while you're watching, while you're folding laundry or kind of doing something else. And it kind of works both ways. Like you can watch it when you're paying attention and kind of catch little clues and figure out what the reveal is, or you can just kind of watch it as like a hangout movie where a bunch of, celebrities are kind of playing these, oversized, pompous, elites just hanging out and, trading quips and having fun. And it kind of works on both fronts. Like it works as just like a goofy kind of piece of ensemble entertainment. And it works as this kind of, takedown of the mystery genre, while also playing into the tropes people like about them. I guess where I disagree with what you were saying, though, I agree with you, I guess, in the sense of the message of the film, I think is very pointed. I think, it's very deliberate what he's saying, and I think he gets the climactic moment right. But I think the movie is kind of missing that Ana de Armas heart. I feel like, in that first movie...
You do get it with Janelle Monáe.
Eventually, but I feel like it's more present in this movie in a way that...
But that's the thing. I think that if they had really overdone it with that, it would have felt too much like the first one. So I'm good with them subverting it in that way, because I think I would have been unhappy if they had just... Yeah.
But then that relies on Benoit Blanc. Am I pronouncing
Benoit Blanc?
Benoit Blanc.
Which I liked. They gave him a little bit more to do here. He felt more like a main character instead of like
He's more of the main character for 2/3 of the film, which is an interesting choice, and I think works when they're on the island, but doesn't work when they're not on the island.
They're barely off the island, though.
True, but that setup is where I guess I find myself a little bit hesitant, because it just takes so long.
That's true. I wasn't fully bought into this movie before certain things happen.
Sure.
And I was a little bit like, okay, when are we going to get to the thing? Like, this is kind of taking a while. Wait a second. We're like an hour in. Yeah.
And that's
but for me, I think it was all worth it in the end.
I think. Is that Netflix, I think, is a lot of their stuff, or a lot of the original content at least, does kind of have that kind of rambling feel to it, where they kind of, they expect people kind of be walking in and out of the film, so they don't feel as pressure to be as tight and as controlled, which can be fine on Netflix, but when you're watching a theater, I feel it's a little bit more obvious. I
don't know if I buy into Johnson really gearing this movie that much toward a Netflix audience. I honestly get the sense that he just kind of made this the way he wanted to make this. I don't know.
I think in the broad sense, that's probably true. But I guess
maybe he had it in his mind, but I mean, sure, people watch movies that were not made for Netflix on Netflix all the time.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
And it works for that. I mean,
Yeah, like Uncharted, I think we were talking about that in an earlier episode, like, didn't really do great in theaters, I don't think, at least critically, but...
It did okay.
Doing gangbusters on Netflix, and you can kind of understand why.
I mean, yeah, it's an easy, like, oh yeah, I did just make this popcorn over here anyway. Might as well watch this Uncharted movie. I've got this popcorn. What else am I going to do? But, yeah, I like this movie a good bit. It's not one of my favorite movies of 2022.
Sure.
By no means. And, Knives Out was not one of my favorite movies of 2019. I don't think, I think some people watch these movies and are like a little bit more of like, oh my gosh, this is like defining cinema for me. And I won't go that far because I don't like these movies that much, but I do really enjoy them a lot. I love them for what they are. And they're not movies that necessarily challenge me as a particular moviegoer all that much. Not that they don't have challenging material in them, but I do get this. They're crowd pleasers. That's what I like about them. I kind of like that they are sort of like what you're saying. They're laid back. You can just kind of like sit down, hang out with this movie, and it might make you think a little bit, but it's certainly not like the kind of film that just has me up at night. I wasn't like dwelling on this movie or anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's multi-purpose. Like, you can just watch it as a slick piece of entertainment, or you can really kind of dive into what it's saying politically. I don't know. I guess for me, where we disagree is I feel like as you mentioned, the politics of it, the messaging of it is meant to be a little bit more deliberately messy. I think that's fine in the scheme of things, but I think that just still makes it weaker than the first movie, where I feel like it could have its heart on sleeve. It could be a little bit more thoughtful about its presentation, and it could have Ana de Armas really ground the film in an investing and meaningful way, in addition to being like a fun, slick romp like this one can often be. And I feel like this movie...
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll give the first movie...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it does get to what you're talking, like, it does get to some of that emotional heart, but you kind of have to sit with the movie for a while to get to that. and that's fine. But I just feel like as an overall investing experience, like that first movie, without giving away, has like the perfect ending. This has like I think a pretty good ending. Like I think the climax is strong. I think the ending's like pretty good.
It's like a weirdly similar ending. Oh yeah, I shouldn't say that. But there's another movie that came out this year. I won't say what movie because I don't want to give things away. But there's another movie that came out this year, and it's like so similar to like this one that I'm just kind of like, huh, like why do we keep doing it this kind of ending? But I don't know. Also, like look, one thing that the first movie does have that I don't think this movie necessarily has, and it is a little too early to judge because I've only seen it once, and maybe that's the reason. But the first movie does have like really definable moments in it that like stick out. So the recurring bit where everyone sort of imagines themselves in the flashback of the Christopher Plummer character, right? Like that's a very like that sticks out. Ana de Armas drinking the cup, iconic moment. There's puking. The whole thing. Huh?
Her puking.
The puking bit. Yes. Yeah, I mean that's a very memorable thing. It's such a fun little thing about the movie. And there's one other thing that I'm forgetting. Oh, there's that whole really cringy scene where they're all talking about immigration and politically, and like the whole framing of all the political stuff in that scene. I always found it like very interesting, kind of hard to watch, honestly. It's it is cringe, but it does stick out.
Yeah,
particularly for that time.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to try to say that the first movie is without cringe, but I think that first movie...
and there is also, there is the Daniel Craig, like the donut hole thing. I mean, that's everybody's favorite moment, it seems.
But I feel like the first movie, maybe it's giving a little too much credit, but I felt it was a little bit better about giving some of its more cringy assets to the needed characters that need to be a little cringy in a way that I feel like this movie... more characters.
Equal opportunity cringe.
Yeah, equal opportunity cringe is in this one, I guess.
Benoit Blanc gets to be a little cringe. Yeah. Cringe. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, outside of the cringe, some great outfits in this film. From the whole cast.
Yeah, he's rocking the ascot.
Yeah, but especially from Blanc.
They decided in between movies, you know what? He's gay. And everybody was just like, let's do it.
Yeah, he has a... celebrity love interest that I won't dare spoil.
Yeah, he does.
But it's quite fun. You say Tom Jones?
No, I said I'm jealous.
Oh, jealous. Oh, you're jealous. Yeah, I can understand you.
Yeah, I'm not outing Tom Jones. Come on now. But yeah, good movie. It sounds like we're both like, on slightly different pages, but I don't think we're in a different book altogether.
No, I mean, I think, solid movie. Like I said, I think for me, the high points were often with Batista. I feel like he's just really keyed into this movie in a great way. And I feel like, I mean, he's just always been good. Or not, yeah. I guess like since Guardians, like he's just been, really working with like some of our, top talent, fumbled a few times. He did like a My Spy here and there. I won't hold it against him, but he really latched on to like these key supporting roles in like films like this and Dune and Blade Runner 2049, of course. And it just...
They suit him well.
And I think he's, becoming quite a great character actor. And I think he just really seems, I think even more so than some of his co-stars, really keyed into what this movie needs to be and what his role needs to be. It's a little tired to have him being like, oh, I'm like this internet personality, but I live with my mom and all this stuff, where it's just like, that's like an entire trope. Just make him pathetic, on the onset, like just like pathetic by nature, because that's a lot of these, right-wing men activist types are just kind of embarrassing just by being present in public as they are. But other than that, I thought his character was a lot of fun, and like I said, I also enjoyed the Norton and the Blanc and the Monet, and had a good time.
The Blanc? You mean Daniel Craig?
The Blanc, yeah. I'm putting the in front of these actors for some reason. I don't know why. It's late.
Yeah, I think for me, I was a big fan of like what Kate Hudson's doing here. She gets one particular scene that is just, it's so well done. It's one of those things where like it works so well because of how she sells the dialogue. It stands out quite well.
Yeah, if it's a scene you're thinking of, I mean, you gotta give credit. Yeah, I was gonna say you gotta also give credit to Jessica Henwick, because she's the one that really delivers that. Well, line.
I was about to mention that. So Jessica Henwick, I think. Similar, I agree with you about Catherine Hahn and Leslie Odom Jr. I think those three, they were really missing like moments or something. Like it just felt like the movie really belongs to like Edward Norton, like you said. Great to see him, by the way. I know we saw him in like French Dispatch and everything, but it's just nice to see him in a non-Wes Anderson movie.
Did you ever end up seeing Motherless Brooklyn?
No.
It's okay. He directed it too.
Yeah, I wasn't compelled to see it, but
yeah.
And I know people are big fans of like Madeline Klein. Apparently, like Mike Wilverholz was telling us that she's apparently the bee's knees in Outer Banks. I thought she was very interesting in this. Like she has a couple. That's the thing. I felt like she had more sort of like character moments in this than Catherine Hahn and Leslie Odom Jr. Who I'm like, oh my gosh, these are like big names, and it just seemed a little weird to me. Jessica Henwick, I kind of understand because of the nature of that character. She's not really like that, at least at first glance, like, she's not that important to the plot, maybe. But yeah, certainly I kind of walked away from the movie being like,
Yeah. I guess
that could have been filled by lots of different people. And I feel like Jessica Henwick is a real talent. So
sure.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like she's done mostly TV stuff, so I'm not as familiar with her. I feel like she might be a little bit.
She has done TV and movies. She was in, she was just in The Matrix.
I know, I was going to mention that, but I was going to say, like, outside of that, like, she's done, like, Marvel stuff, I think, which have been a little bit out of my orbit. Didn't she do, like, Iron Fist or something?
She was Colleen in Marvel Fist. She was, like, the best character in that show. Like, she was the reason that show was, like, as salvageable as it was.
Right.
She had one of the lead roles in Love and Monsters, a movie I liked a good bit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, yeah, so yeah, she was in that one.
She had kind of a small role in On the Rocks. She was in that.
Yeah.
She had I know she was in that one, Underwater, with what's her name? Kristen Stewart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's been in some stuff.
Sure. I mean, I could not remember much about Underwater, I'll admit, but I
vaguely remember her in that Drake Doremus movie with Nicholas Hoult from like, I think it's 2017.
Is that the one?
I don't know if you even watched Newness, but I think we talked about his last movie, you and me, the one with Shailene Woodley. But
okay. Any case,
Endings Beginnings.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that one.
Okay, I couldn't remember if you saw it. Okay,
no, I did not.
But also, Jessica Henwick was in The Gray Man. You mentioned The Gray Man earlier in this episode of Cinemaholics.
I didn't see that film.
Me neither.
Yeah, but no, I was gonna say between what she did in the most recent Matrix movie and this, I feel like she's been really standing out in these key supporting roles. And I'm like, yeah, she's got the goods. I just kind of want to see her get something that, services talents well. And I feel like that'll come eventually, but it hasn't come today.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, she's had supporting roles in lots of things, but sure, I can't think of something I've seen her in where it really felt like, wow, like she is just really killing it, I guess. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about the film, especially given that we have another film to discuss. But I will say, to wrap this up, on my end at least, more cucking in this movie than I anticipated, which I felt was pretty fun. I won't give away which character gets cucked by who, but I thought that was kind of delightful.
Well, I'm not even going to comment on that. Let the mystery stay where it is.
Accept the mystery, to quote a serious man.
All right. Well, that is Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery. It is not in theaters now, but it might be again soon. And you'll be able to see it on Netflix. When did you say? December 23rd? Just a couple days before Christmas.
I believe that's when it's supposed to come to Netflix. I can double check.
It's a long movie, like we said, 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So you have your work cut out for you. You got a movie to watch there. Well, let's get into the Rotten Tomatoes game. Now, well, actually, we have 256 reviews counted. That's a lot. A lot of people are like, you know what? Give me a piece of that onion. Let's do it. What do you think the critic score is for Glass Onion?
So I think it's going to be critic-wise pretty favorable. I'm going to even go so far as to say a 94%.
So close, Will Ashton. So close. You're 1% off. Now, do you think that it is then 1% off in a negative direction or positive direction? So is it 93 or is it a 95?
I'm feeling 95.
I'm sorry, Will Ashton. I think you had Lightning McQueen on the brain. Probably why you wanted to say 95. But unfortunately for you, it is 93%. So, but I appreciate your optimism. Certainly perked my spirits. What about the audience score, Will? We have 500 plus verified ratings. Let's see how you do with that.
Audience score? I don't know. Based on my audience, they seem to be pretty with it. Maybe not as much as the first one, but
my audience liked it a good decent bit, as it turns out.
You advertise that a lot. I'm gonna say.
What are you talking about, Will?
93%.
93%. Well, did you cheat? Did you look at it? You could just tell me.
I did not cheat.
Did you just be like, oh, I got the audience, I got the critic score wrong, but I don't want John to stop believing in me? And all right, yes, it's 93%. Well done. And 93-93 split.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they're both 93. Well
done. I actually don't know if this has a cinema score. Let's check.
I don't think it would.
Cinema score? No, it does not. Netflix was like, I don't want anybody in Vegas even watching this movie, even when it comes out on Netflix. That's what he said.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at the Letterboxd.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what?
I don't know. It was going to be dumb. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. So on letterboxd.com, we have 84,000 watches. That's actually not that much for a movie like this. I was expecting six figures, but okay. What do you think the average rating is, Will Ashton?
4.1.
Well,
what?
You got to be cheating.
I'm not cheating.
You never get it spot on 2 times. My
hands are here. My phone is right over here.
I don't know. There's a mystery afoot, and I'm feeling a little bit like Benoit Blanc myself. But I will, for now, trust you unconditionally. So, okay. Congratulations, Will Ashton.
Thank you.
You have won the Rotten Tomatoes game as you usually do. Let's move on to the Fabelmans.
Yeah, before I forget, it is December 23rd for the Netflix debut.
Yeah. All right. The Fabelmans. We're going to end on a Spielberg movie here. And Steven Spielberg has made truly some of the best films of all time.
I thought you were going to name them all. He's made, I want to say,
let's start with Sugarland Express.
40 movies or something?
No, I mean, Steven Spielberg. Some call him the greatest director of all time. I would not argue with them. I think that he is certainly of that in the argument for the greatest.
Certainly among the living American filmmakers, one of the most indelible, populist filmmakers of our time.
That's the thing. If you judge the man by the criteria of the best filmography versus his contribution to cinema, he excels tremendously at both, because this is the man who brought us really the blockbuster. Some people say the blockbuster predated Jaws. I don't know about that. To me, the history seems pretty settled on Jaws being the original blockbuster.
I mean, even if it's not the first blockbuster in the traditional sense, it's the movie that created the summer movie season.
Mm-hmm. It really did. And that's really what people tend to mean by that, right? Because nowadays we get blockbusters all year long. But it was a very different story back in the day, right? And yes, Jaws, of course, and the Indiana Jones trilogy, certainly, Jurassic Park, one of the quintessential achievements in special effects. To this day, people watch scenes from Jurassic Park and are like, this exceeds the quality of films that you can't even measure Jurassic Park up against stuff coming out today, including other Jurassic Park movies. It still looks better and it has aged better. Spielberg is just he's a visionary director. He's a technical master. He's just somebody who gets it, and even beyond some of the technicals, we can look at his movies like Close Encounters. We can look at his movies like E.T. We can look at his recent stuff like Bridge of Spies and Catch Me If You Can, Lincoln, movies that also have a lot of heart to them. There's like a Spielbergian sort of coming of age quality to a lot of his films, because he's an honest artist. He's just really good at bringing his baggage to stuff, and his baggage tends to resonate with people. So I'm a big fan of Spielberg. I certainly have said critical things about Spielberg in recent years, and in recent group chats that Will Ashton is part of.
Sure.
And, to me, there is nothing wrong with pointing out that, Spielberg's not a god. He's not perfect. He has limitations, I'm sure he's well aware of. And there's nothing wrong with pointing those things out. And I think that they pale in comparison to what he brings to cinema. And I don't think there's a better movie to talk about in that respect, in that context, than truly his most personal movie of all time. Some people might say, no. E.T. is his most personal movie because that one is really directly dealing with something that he was going through in real time. I guess not real time, but closer to when it happened, versus The Fabelmans, which is basically like semi-autobiographical to his life.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think didn't really become clear for a lot of people until this film, is that his parents have been so infused in so many of his great films. They just kind of, that because they're about so many different things, they kind of get overshadowed. Like, not only E.T., which very much relates to his relationship with his mother and his absentee father, but also his other films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind very much deals with his parents. Catch Me If You Can very much deals with his parents. I mean, there are several other examples. I don't want to go through his whole filmography, but his relationship and his tethered, dysfunctional relationship with his divorcee parents it's something that he's been kind of searching throughout his whole resume. Yes. And something that
also, though, his Jewish identity.
Yes, exactly.
And his troubled, high school experience, yes. Which I remember, Will, when I was at a football game with our friend, Brian Coleman. Brian was one of my groomsmen. You got to meet him. Truly one of my closest friends. And Brian and I were at a football game years ago in San Jose. And Brian told me, this was a high school football game because we knew some of the people there. Okay. And Brian did youth outreach and stuff like that. And so Brian and I were sitting there, and he tells me, by the way, did you know that Steven Spielberg went to this high school? And I was like, no way. I thought that Steven Spielberg lived in Arizona, and then he eventually moved to, I knew the whole story of how he went to the Universal lot and talked his way into working there. He literally would just sneak there, and he got his first couple jobs. Then that eventually turned into him directing Duel. And he was like, nope, he lived here. He lived here, and he had a horrific experience at that high school. And I was like, seriously? He was like, it was so bad that the alumni of the school don't even recognize that he went here, and neither does he, because he faced so much anti-Semitism there, and he was bullied relentlessly, because it's like how The Fabelmans portrays it. He went when he was older, a senior in high school, and he just felt completely out of place. He didn't want to be there. And yeah, it certainly, and obviously his family life was going through a time, and it was interesting to see this movie depicted in more detail, obviously, through the fictional retelling. But yeah, that was something where I was kind of like, huh. So this is what he was getting at, because I've seen some people be it's so cartoonish what he went through. And I was like, based on what I've heard, it doesn't seem like it's that far off. He straight up, people are bullies in high school, as it turns out, especially in the 60s and 70s. Yeah,
I mean, that's something I feel has been kind of the case with this movie. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel there's just been some weird criticisms directed at this film. I'm not trying to dissuade people from having criticisms about the film. That's fine. It's, if you don't like the film for whatever reason, or you nitpick the film for whatever reason, that's fine. That's totally valid. But I feel people are just kind of saying weird things oh, this seems exaggerated. This doesn't seem quite true. Where it's from what I can tell, a lot of this is obviously some of it's heightened for dramatic effect, but a lot of it's also pretty toned down and, streamlined for, the sake of the narrative. And also some people are just I don't know how I feel about the casting of his parents. He didn't quite get it right, where it's no offense, but who are you to say that? This is Spielberg. His, I'm going to trust him and feel he's going to, believe, if he says this is what his parents are I believe it. You can, feel however you feel about the performances. But yeah, just I just feel people are saying, frankly, some just kind of odd things about this film. And I just can't say that a lot of them are warranted at this moment.
I do wonder if a lot of that too, and look, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. I do not dislike it at all. I had a good time watching this. But I'm certainly not this is best picture. This is one of the best of the year. It's not in my top 10, but I think it's quite good. And I think that I really respect Spielberg for making this movie. I'm glad he got to make this movie because he's been wanting to, and I know he was waiting a long time. you could tell that he wanted to make this movie at the right time. He wanted to make it when, honestly, he had the room to explore this part of his life without worrying about like his parents watching it. And, you know, as it turns out, his parents lived long lives. I think his father lived to be like over 100. And so like it was that kind of thing where he's like, Spielberg's what, 75, 76 now? And I think he's in a place where he has, like I said, that room to sort of like go back to this time with slightly more objectivity than he might have a decade or 2 decades ago. And I think, though, at the same time, I do have my criticisms of this movie. But to what you're saying, I have seen some of those like, this feels exaggerated, this feels absurd. And I guarantee you some of these same people are the same people who watched Licorice Pizza last year and were like, this is great, you know, where it's like, no, you can watch stuff like this and buy into it. I think some people are just sort of bringing their, you know, Spielberg is a sacred cow and I'm going to look edgy if I say something negative about Spielberg in a hyperbolic way.
Sure.
A lot of people like to do that because it's a shortcut to looking like you're a smart person when you are purposely and artificially contrarian instead of contrarian with some substance, which I think is a lot harder thing to pull off. And I think it's easier to recognize when somebody's just sort of being a contrarian to get attention instead of like, hey, you know what, like I do have an alternate perspective on this and you have the goods to back it up. That's what I always look for, because to me, that's interesting. I know you and I have argued about this when it comes to a certain film critic. Not argued, but certainly we've come to blows a little bit because there's a certain critic where I feel like fits the ladder and you don't agree, and of course that's fine.
If it's a critic I'm thinking of, I tend to agree, and you know, I think we like to pick on certain critics just between the two of us. I can assure any potential critics who are listening to this show that it's probably not you, but you know.
But at the same time, I'm sure, Will, you and I are that critic to somebody else who knows, and that's the circle of life, isn't it?
But yeah, I mean, despite saying that before, I have seen some genuine criticisms that, you know, not any criticism of film is unwarranted, to be sure. But with that said, for one, Licorice Pizza is a great film, and I think this is a great film. In fact, I would even go so far as to say this is Spielberg's best movie in a decade. Maybe a little bit longer.
I mean, it's better than West Side Story.
I would agree.
Better than The Post. Better than Ready Player One.
Yes, absolutely better than Ready Player One.
I think the last Spielberg movie I watched that I thought was terrific, like just really well done, was Bridge of Spies, which was 2015.
Yeah, I thought that was good. I would say it's probably his best since Lincoln. Maybe his best since The Adventures of Tintin.
I loved Adventures of Tintin, so I'm certainly of a kind there. Tintin that was after Lincoln, huh? And Warhorse?
No, Tintin was before Lincoln.
Was it? Okay, Lincoln was 2010 Warhorse, or 2012. Do I have my dates wrong?
Tintin was 2011. Same year as Warhorse, and then after that was 2013's Lincoln.
Okay. For some reason, I had it in my head that Lincoln was 2012. So yeah, that tracks.
No, wait. No, actually, you are correct. I misspoke. Lincoln is 2012.
It's 2012. Okay. Yes. Well, I mean, originally I thought Lincoln was 2010, so I was not correct. But okay. Yeah, so certainly Fabelmans for me is like up there. I think I like Bridge of Spies a little bit more, but Fabelmans is the kind of movie where I feel like I could watch again and be like, you know what, this does hit me right. I do have a couple criticisms, but the basic setup of this movie, we've touched on it, of course, is that this is recounting not just Steven Spielberg's adolescent coming-of-age story, but really also the origin story for him as a filmmaker, and some of the things that drive him as a filmmaker, how some of that stuff began. One thing that I think the film avoids wisely is being sort of like, this is how he thought of E.T., you know, and stuff like that. It's certainly not doing too much of that. Obviously, there's a little bit, because certainly there were influences that Spielberg himself has talked about. Like, for example, they don't have a scene where he's watching West Side Story. That would have been annoying. No, nothing like that. But this movie, it balances two main plots. The plot of young Sammy Fabelman, who is played by two different actors, mainly played by Gabriel Labelle, and it's showing him kind of like growing up at, in middle school, high school, shooting his first couple of movies, finding different ways to make the movie work and being creative, but also then navigating, like we said, like bullies and moving to a new place, but also, his first love, all that sort of fun, coming of age stuff. It also balances it with the story of his parents. His parents here are played by Michelle Williams and Paul Dano. And I certainly don't disagree with the idea that the actors are a little bit hit or miss. And I do disagree with the idea of like, they're miscast. It's like, well, look, he's casting his parents. Now, I don't know what went into all of that. Did he have the full freedom to cast who he wanted to cast? I don't know. Maybe, probably. He's Spielberg. But certainly, I don't walk away from it questioning Spielberg's judgment. But I do think that I think Paul Dano works here. I think Michelle Williams kind of botches it. And I think that's where you and I are probably going to have our sharpest disagreement, I guess. But I don't even think a lot of it has to do with Michelle Williams as an actress. I just think that some of the writing here with this character is excruciating. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Spielberg. I don't know if it's Tony Kushner who co-wrote it. I don't know. But to me, some of it works really well. Some of it does not. And it's kind of hit or miss for me.
So, just to touch on your earlier point, this role was written, at least in part, according to Spielberg, with Michelle Williams in mind. So
I can see that. I mean, if you look at the photos, she's a dead ringer. But that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it like, was it the look of it? And also like, okay, I know Michelle Williams is a good actress. I think she looks the part. She can act the hell out of it. I got to have her. But like, that doesn't necessarily mean she's right for the part. That doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be able to bring to it what Spielberg had in his head. But of course, he had it in his head and he went for it, which I respect. But and can I say, there is a scene in this movie where the young version of, actually both of them, but actually, you know what? There is a scene in this movie where the young Fabelman, played by the younger actor, I forget his name, but he's like a younger unknown. He brings Michelle Williams, a character, into his like closet to watch a movie. And I mean, Michelle Williams is like mesmerizing in how she sits there with him and communicates with him. It's beautiful stuff. A lot of the tough, trickier stuff with her comes later in the movie, where I just think we lose this character to a degree that I don't think was on purpose. That's all.
So, I mean, for as much as you think we're going to disagree about this, when I saw the film, I was initially kind of like, as much as I love all this, I'm a little kind of uncertain about how I feel about Michelle Williams. Mainly because I think, as you were alluding to, she has built her career off of playing these kind of more intuitive characters who, have moments of, great emotional outbursts, but they tend to be reserved for like when they're kind of pushed to the brink. Or
Manchester by the Sea, probably
Manchester by the Sea is certainly one example of that I find to be very good. I think the primary example of this, and I believe it's the one that Spielberg took to heart, was Blue Valentine.
Okay, yes. Love Blue. Yes, love Blue Valentine for sure.
Which I think was crucial to her casting in this film, as far as I can tell. But yeah, I mean, the fascinating thing there is that, like, you have her building this career primarily off of, independent films, independent dramas, as well as, noted shows like Dawson's Creek.
Dawson's Creek. That's how I was introduced to her. She's terrific in that show. Too good for it, honestly.
But yeah, like even like in some kind of broader performances of hers, like Brokeback Mountain, she still has like kind of more reserved demeanor. And this is her kind of abandoning that to play what's quite easily her broadest, kind of more outlandish personality. And initially, I kind of pushed back against that because I was like, is this kind of miscasting? Is this kind of going against what Michelle Williams does really well? And I kind of went back and forth on it. And then I've kind of settled, well, I still think Paul Dano of the two is the stronger performance. I think you kind of need that Michelle Williams fire. I think you kind of need that passion to really sell this film, because it's so crucial to what he's getting at here, which is that, you have that opening scene where he's going to his first movie ever, which happens to be, in an ironic twist of fate, the, greatest show on earth. And he's waiting in line.
Good movie. Lives up to the name.
Really? I've heard it's quite bad.
You think it's bad?
I've heard it's bad. I've never seen it.
Oh, you should watch it. It has a lot of charm.
I've heard it's one of the weakest Best Picture winners.
I don't think I agree with that. Come on.
Well, you can take that up with anyone who said that. I can't speak on the film.
It's not DeMille's best, but sure. I don't know. Maybe I'm just an easy mark. Who knows?
Sure. But in any case, opening scene, perfect. Because you have, young Sammy Fabelman torn between his two parents, the left side and right side of his brain. His dad's very pragmatic, like, this is what movies are in a most basic sense. Like, you have, this, and this from a technical standpoint. But, it's not just that. Like, that's what makes movies work, but it's the emotion that makes them sing. And that's what he gets from his mom, and then the technical prowess, what he gets from his dad, the engineer, and then the artist. And so you kind of need, Dano to be that kind of reserved, emotionally conflicted guy, but you need someone who is that very bombastic, deeply felt, emotional, honestly personality. And whether you feel Michelle Williams communicates that or not, I think she needs to give that performance. And I think, it's not my absolute favorite of hers. If she wins the Oscar for it, I'd be like, well, maybe more of a lifetime achievement thing than like, this is her best work. But as far as like what she brings to the film, I think it's so crucial to making this movie hit its emotional beats that I ultimately can't fault it for what she's doing and what it's doing with that performance and that character.
See, where I come away from it is slightly different, where I think that the movie doesn't nor shouldn't rely too much on Michelle Williams' character in the way that it does. Because to me, I think Gabriel LaBelle is so good in the role. And I think that he's such an interesting main character that I almost feel like Spielberg shied away from letting him own this movie. I think the movie starts to like lean on him more, but then it dovetails in, well, now we got to have a big scene with Paul Dano, and now we have to have a big scene with Michelle Williams, and they're going to like occupy the whole thing. And it's like, I think the movie's kind of missing some moments where the actual Spielberg avatar can come in and be a little bit more of a presence. He's such an observer. And I get it. It's part of the script. It's part of the idea. But I don't know. I just think that the movie needed a little bit more of sort of that earnestness, that Spielbergian wonder that he does bring to child actors. I think he feels more comfortable doing in movies where the character is not so clearly modeled after him, that I think is missing kind of here. He does get one scene where he sees himself filming in a mirror where I was like, yes, there is your movie. There is like, yes, Spielberg, you are getting into it. But then it dovetails into, now we have Michelle Williams being a manic pixie dream mom for like 10 minutes.
Keep using that term, at least in private. It's not going to make any more sense the more you say it, but I admire that
she's a manic pixie dream mom. It's true.
Okay, well, I'll let you and Freud figure that one out. But in any case, I think I get what you're saying, but I think what makes it work for me, that performance, is that we get to spend so much time with him in the high school scenes, and that's so crucial.
Even
to that
then, though, I think he barely talks, he barely interacts. Like a lot of it is just people yelling at him, and he's just like not saying anything. And sure. I get it, he's shy, and like that's fine. But like I don't know, I just don't think he has a bit of a lack of agency that I think is the idea. But it starts to get grating because it starts to hit the same note over and over again. But
I mean, that kind of gets into like the whole point of the film, though, is that like for him, it's about him honing that visual style, that voice. And I don't necessarily agree with you with the quiet moments, because you have that tremendous scene where he's working through his parent thing while he's on set making that war movie, and he's like giving the actor the motivation he needs. He's going through all this deep pain, but he's able to transfer it over to this amateur.
Well, that's what I mean by hit or miss. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that works really well, but I again, it's like it's in a sea of scenes where we just sort of watch him not react or not really like intervene or do anything. Like characters have to yell at him for him to do anything, and like the whole Judd Hirsch scene, which is great. It's just really like one actor just yelling at him for like 10 minutes and he just barely responds. And like, I don't know, it's fine. It's just, I think that there is something where I'm like, it's almost like Gabriel LaBelle isn't being allowed to like work that range a bit. And he seems like such a great new talent to me. Like, really great discovery from Spielberg that, similar to Mike Faist in the West Side Story, I think was like such a standout in that movie. And I hope he is still on the scene because, yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's no denying that Spielberg has made a career out of finding great young talent. And I think that's no exception here. And do I think he could have had more scenes where he showcased that? Sure. But I also think that this movie is about him kind of wrestling with the idea of being the observer and someone who is, in his own way, kind of giving agency to his family by filming all these things and kind of controlling the filmmaking and having this kind of authority that seemingly no one else can understand but needs, which is that he can use these skills in a very emotional and practical way, kind of hone these home videos and also to his kind of emotional detriment, change the narrative and kind of keep this, long burden secret that, is eating up at him. But he knows for the sake of the rest of the family and for his sisters that he needs to kind of carry this thing. And that feels into a common criticism and something the movie directly addresses, which is like, why does Spielberg kind of feel this need to be so kind of sympathetic and empathetic, even to some of the like most despicable people in and outside of his life? And I feel like this movie tackles that without giving away in a very thoughtful and kind of profound way, in a way that I feel is giving some deep resolve to, a filmmaker who through this film is searching for things that I think he's always kind of known, but needs to make this film to discover. And I guess that's really kind of profound and beautiful for me.
I guess the struggle for me is that at the onset of the movie, I get the sense that Spielberg is chasing some semblance of closure on this story and sharing it with the audience in a way that I really respect and admire him for, because he doesn't need to prove himself to anybody. But I think for me, it's just by the time we get to the end of it, I just don't get the sense that the audience or him have gotten that closure. And I think it feels a little bit more of like a friend bringing up something traumatic without actually like really talking about it in a way that moves them forward. It just sort of is like, well, this happened, the movie. And that's how it comes across to me. And I get that, like, for some people, like, I think what I'm seeing in terms of like the positive reactions to this, I can tell that this is really working well and really striking a chord with filmmakers, with artists in general. And I get why, because there are scenes in this where I'm watching it, like the way that he, as a kid, is figuring out ways to do things. It's the kind of thing where he is such an artisan, like a technical artisan. And that's how his brain operates. And I think that's what makes him a really great storyteller in terms of like how he's able to take existing material and just technically blast it to the world in a sensible, relatable way. That's his skill. And I think that the thing that I don't think he has a great skill for is the actual like origin of that creativity. There's a reason I think that he hasn't written and I don't want to talk on my ass here, but like, what are his best movies that he's written? Well, in your opinion,
Close Encounters. Didn't he also write E.T.?
Yes, he did. I was trying to think if he co-wrote it, but I think he just wrote it. Yeah,
he co-wrote Close Encounters, I think, but I think he only wrote the story.
He co-wrote Poltergeist. That's what I was thinking of.
Okay, well, that he didn't. Well, officially,
he didn't direct that
officially. Well, you can kind of believe what you want to believe.
I don't think he did write E.T.
I thought he wrote the story for it, but he didn't write the screenplay.
Yeah, I don't think he has a credit on the screenplay. I'll double check that, but
okay.
I think, I don't think he wrote it. I think, he directed it, but yes, Close Encounters, you are totally correct. But AI. Okay, I knew there was another one that he wrote. There's only one movie I can think of that he has written since Poltergeist.
I mean, I was kind of fascinated by how much this movie did make me think of AI, considering that people always talk about like, oh, that's like him in a sort of director for hire mode making the long lost Kubrick movie. But like, there is a lot of Spielberg in that movie in a way that I feel like, it's still kind of being evaluated with time, how personal that movie could be, even though he's making another filmmaker's film in a way.
Yes. And you see it in this movie, which I think is really apt, where a lot of the stuff that he's doing as a director, as like a, you know, as a student, as like a young director, he's not really writing stories here. He's just sort of like taking existing archetypes of movies and doing them again. Like that's the whole impetus for like Greatest Show on Earth, right? Is like he's not really like writing something. He is just sort of like focusing on how he could do his own version of it. And that's what I've always respected about Spielberg. I personally don't relate to him, I think, as much as like some other people do. I think a lot of filmmakers will relate to him. I think a lot of people who want to be filmmakers or go to film school and stuff like that will relate to him because they're directors or they're DPs or they're people who revel in the technical stuff. And I certainly love the technical stuff. I think it's so fascinating, but that's not my primary focus as like a lover of film and, you know, as like writing books and stuff. I'm more of like, if you gave me a job in the movie industry, it's screenwriting, it's writing novels. It's like, that is my zone. And that's where I find my art. And so I don't connect as easily, I think, to like Spielberg's, you know, like to me, Spielberg is like a unicorn. He fascinates me because our minds work so differently. And I think that he is just so like, he's such an admirable sort of, trying to find a good word for him that isn't puffing him up too much, you know. But no, he's just like he's just a wonderful like influence. He's just a wonderful icon of cinema, in all the best ways. But he's just not somebody that I look to where I think that his writing is anything to write home about, pun intended. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to like come out of this being like trying to like take Spielberg down a peg as if I could have even attempted.
Well, I mean, I do need to say this, which is that I think maybe you and I are looking for different things in this film, which is fine. I'm not.
That's possible, yeah.
I'm not trying to dissuade what you wanted out of the film or what you got out of the film. But yeah, you talk about like closure in the sense that like this film needs to have that like kind of definitive statement made, I guess. And for me, what I find beautiful about the film and what I find really resonant is that it is so searching. It's so open-hearted about this, but it is from a clear, you know, master of the craft. And I feel like every decision, you know, from a technical standpoint is, you know, very deliberate. Like it's edited very precisely. The music comes at a very deliberate time in this film. Like that's another thing, like the score, you know, we're so used to like, you know, these John Williams scores and, Spielberg movies being very bombastic and kind of carrying throughout the film. I believe the score, sweeping is a good word for it. I believe the score doesn't even actually kick into this movie until like the headlight scene, which is like, I think halfway into the film. Like a lot of this movie is without music in a way that I find so fascinating for Spielberg.
And John Williams.
And John Williams. And this is his last, I think, original score. I think he's doing music for the new Indiana Jones, but I think that's like his last film. Outside of maybe some Star Wars commitments, I can't even tell anymore. But yeah, I mean, I just think, for me, I guess it's this veteran filmmaker allowing himself to kind of open this wound in a very public and vulnerable way, in a very kind of nakedly emotional way, but allowing himself to have that very apparent craft, that very precise filmmaking that he gets from his dad, his left side of the brain, but allowing that emotion, that fluidity, that sense that he could kind of open himself up and be very spontaneous in a way that is, you know, open-hearted and searching, and create something that has that sort of messy quality, but has a very precise filmmaking craft. And I think that's what I find so resonant about the film. It's that it can be both.
Yeah,
things.
that he gets that from his mom.
And, he gets that from his mom, and that's how he's honoring his parents in this film. Like he is doing the both at the same time. That's been throughout his film. Like, yeah, and it makes I think a tremendous film.
That to me is where it just there's something he presents about his mother though, where, and maybe I agree with him about this, I think his mother is an artist in a way that he recognizes he isn't. And that is that like she is able to not just spontaneously, like you're saying, you know, create something or adapt to something on the fly, but she is able to, I think, tap into what it means to be human and the messiness of humanity in a way that at least this film tries to get across, that it feels alien to him. It feels a little bit like he doesn't connect with that. You know, you see it in those scenes where his family is just like, you're like our mom. And he hesitates because he doesn't necessarily see himself that way. I think to what you're saying, he sees himself a little bit more in his father in terms of that, being so acute to technology and using it in order to like accomplish his goals. And so to what you're saying, I think that the closure I think I'm missing is him just sort of like coming away from this, not just honoring his parents, which I think is like a great thing, but I think like if that's the case, this movie has a very weird ending to me because it kind of ends and I just feel like it feels like the ending to a different movie for me. I'm not sure why I feel that way. Maybe it would require another look, but I think it does. It is something that holds me back a bit from really having my heart in this. And that's kind of what it comes down to is that I always felt outside of this movie. I never felt like it really brought me into it. Maybe that's some of my own personal stuff. Honestly, I don't think it's that impressive of a movie. Technically, which is kind of ironic. I know that this is the same cinematographer Spielberg has worked with across his career since I think the 90s, Janu Kaminsky. But yeah, I don't necessarily find this to be that impressive of a film to watch, honestly. There were a lot of sequences that I thought were really, really good, really stellar. There were some where I thought were a little bit rote. Some that were a little bit drawn out needlessly. And then, yeah, last thing I'll say is that I don't love Seth Rogen in this. Maybe people will disagree. I don't know. He kind of stuck out to me in the wrong way. I think in a movie where you have everybody else kind of just like kicking ass, like Julia Butters, like who takes like a role that is very small, but is able to like, because we saw her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right? She's able to take a small role and just like really amplify it way beyond what's asked. And you also have, of course, I think Paul Dano is terrific in this, and Michelle Williams has several scenes that I think are fantastic, and Judd Hirsch, I mean, there you go. And then there's somebody else that I want to give away toward the end of the film, who I was just like enamored. Like you should have heard me gasp in the theater when we saw his face. But,
oh, you didn't know he was going to be in it?
I didn't know.
Oh,
that's
really?
The beauty of, avoiding.
Oh man.
Well, how did you know he was in it? With that,
it's been widely reported.
Okay, yeah, I just had no idea. Like, people knew better than to tell me about it.
But that's the thing is that like, it wasn't reported who he was playing, but it was reported that he was in the film, and then eventually it was like, it was. I didn't know
Judd Hirsch was in it.
Okay.
When I saw Judd Hirsch, I was like, hell yeah, let's go.
But with that cameo, without giving anything away, yeah, I kind of wish I didn't know about it because it would have been more rewarding. But I knew, like, not only did I know the cameo, I'd even heard that story about the filmmaker he's playing before. So, like,
what? That's like the best. That's one of the best parts of the movie when you start to see the. I was like, oh my gosh, are we actually gonna? Okay.
I guess this is where we kind of start to where we continue to diverge. Is that I had honestly kind of forgotten while I was watching a movie that he was going to be in it. And so there's like a point where it's like Sammy and his mom in the kitchen. I was like, oh, I'm fine with this being the end of the film. And then it's like, oh, it's still going. I wonder and then like it hit me. It's like, oh yeah, we haven't got to X part yet. And I got excited all over again. And for me, I got to wildly disagree with your thoughts on the ending, because I found the ending to be fantastic. Like the last shot, I think is great, and I think the last scene is great.
I think the last shot is fine. I don't want to, but I think that I thought that was. I
think it's perfect. It's
a cool moment.
It's him acknowledging that, like, it's twofold. It's him seeing that like he can inspire, he can move on, he can kind of be this type of person for other filmmakers. But it's also saying, like, I'm still learning, I'm still adapting. I'm 70, but I'm still going to keep changing and moving. And I find that to be very uplifting and very beautiful. And it's done in a funny, memorable way. And I thought that the ending was great.
I do like that part. It's less about the last shot. To me, it's more about what the ending is doing as a story. That's all it comes down to. Okay. I think that same really great, effective last shot works. It's just the stuff that leading up to that, I just felt like it was really kind of missing the thread of where we were before. But again, I am nitpicking to a certain extent.
Yeah, disagree. No, I I mean, I'm not gonna say it's like, completely seamless and that's, without rote moments, as you said. Like, it is. I mean, it's Spielberg. He has those, ingrained in all of his films in some respect or another. I guess for me, where it works is that he has the technical skill and the adept emotionality that, has carried throughout all of his best films. I think this is no exception, of course. I think it's key and crucial to that. It's him searching through that. It's him even kind of acknowledging that, like, he might be a lesser person for, looking for these things as a filmmaker, as opposed to actually living in it. Like that scene you mentioned, where he's like, at one of the most foundational moments of his life, and he can't stop thinking about how he would film it as opposed to be living in it, is great. And what I find so inspiring and fascinating about that is I keep referencing that I listened to the director's cut conversation. It was like a Q&A he did with Paul Thomas Anderson. And he said, and this is what surprised me, is that shot that I think you even mentioned mentioned earlier, was improvised on the set. Like, he didn't have that plan. That was just something he's like, oh, I think we should do this on the set. And I feel like that's the stuff that's where the improvisation comes in. That's like the
that's where he shines. Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that gets kind of overshadowed with Spielberg's career, is that, like, people can forget that, like, Jaws works because it's a miracle. Like, if the production of that film was
it works
disaster,
because of the setbacks, or his reaction to the setbacks.
Right. And that's the dad side coming through, but it's also like the fact that he is able to improvise and do all these things. It's like something that's where it's like when you hear stories where he's like, oh, how did you do this, how did you do this? He's just like, well, we were on set and I had this idea and we just made it work. I mean, that's like
that's beauty. His dad has a whole line of dialogue about that, right? He's like, oh, that's what you get from me. And
right. Yeah. And I don't know, to me, I just find that great. I think it's tremendous.
It's the spirit of filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's something that I could never, it's something that I watch with admiration.
Sure.
Because it's not my personality. I'm not like a sort of, to me, setback just makes me upset.
Sure.
But I love that there are people talented like Spielberg out in the world who were just able to, like, every problem is an opportunity.
Yes.
And I think that is such an admirable skill. It's a rare skill. It's what marks you as, I think, a true visionary. A lot of ways. There's some people, like, ideas are cheap. Being able to write a really great story is not the hardest thing in the world, because I think everybody has a story in them. It's just a measure of how honest you're able to let yourself be and how hardworking you are enough to make that story come out in the best way. But to me, the kind of stuff that Spielberg does, that's like a once in a generation sort of talent. That's just not, it's just not something that comes easy. And it comes from, like, a passion and a drive that, like, I think is extremely rare, but also just amazing to see when it comes out. So it makes me think about, like, this movie makes me think about the people in the world who didn't, have all these things work out for them, who could have been, a Spielberg, but because of circumstances outside their control, were never able to make their mark. And there's a little bit of a sadness to that,
Sure.
But certainly it's great at least to revel in the success stories, because they do exist.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I will say, I mean, if I could be critical of the film, I do kind of wish, for as much as he's able to be messy and searching and vulnerable throughout the film, I do kind of wish he allowed his ego to kind of go down a little bit and allow himself to be more messy as a filmmaker. Like, there's so many moments in this, like, just from the onset, where it's just like, wow, Sammy, you'd, like, already, a little master of the craft. And he's, like, already, like, excelling when he's, like, early on. And I get part of it's just like, it's Spielberg. Like, he's obviously going to be great, in some respect or another. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be Spielberg. And also, it's like, he's earned the right to kind of do that too with this film. But I guess for me, I kind of wish it kind of earned some of those filmmaking moments a little bit more if he kind of allowed the craft to initially be a little bit messier. And then, like, he, as he goes through his traumatic thing, his filmmaking gets better and better and better. And that's kind of there a little bit, but I wish that was a little bit more pronounced in the film.
You kind of see it with the camp stuff. And he kind of frames it of, like, if his heart's not in it, it's just going to be kind of rote.
But it's also still, like, he has, like, that scene with her dancing in the thing where it's like, even
that's true.
When he's, like, not inspired, he still makes great stuff. I don't know. I guess, yeah.
That was a weird scene where he's filming his mom with you mentioned Freud earlier, and, There was, and even like his sister is just like, like,
well, I mean, to his credit, I mean, he was even initially like, I don't know if I want to film this. And then Seth Rogen is like, do it. She'll hate you if you don't.
No, it's not that he's reluctant. It's just more of like, oh yeah, there's not enough light, and the light is what kind of.
I think that's his excuse. I think he wants to be nice. He's like, I don't know, dude, this is a little weird.
I didn't get that sense, but okay,
whatever. Push back against your Rogan comments. I thought he was pretty good in this. Actually, I thought he was more than pretty good. I thought he was quite good. I think he is, of the main actors involved, probably the most limited in terms of what he can do as an actor. But I thought this movie played to his strengths quite well, and I thought he has a really touching scene with young Sammy midway through the film, and I think that shouldn't be discounted.
I discount it.
And that's your right, but I can't say I approve.
Yeah, I just didn't buy it. I mean, there are a couple of scenes where he's Uncle Benny, and it's just kind of like, okay, they're kind of fun. They're built to be fun. But yeah, when the dramatic stuff came in with him, I was not quite convinced. But I get it. I get the appeal. Okay. Well, The Fabelmans. Obviously, we have our disagreements, but I don't think we have as big of a disagreement that we can agree that it's worth watching, it's worth checking out, and it's certainly a movie. I'm glad that Spielberg made this, and I'd have to believe that you agree with that. So it just seemed like it was something he needed to get off his chest, and power to him.
He described it as a $40 million therapy appointment, and that's certainly it. I think, and I don't know. To me, I guess, like I said, I guess I don't need it to be. It can be cathartic without having closure. Like, I think he's finding what he needs to find. I think he's in a better place because of the film. And
closure is a spectrum.
Sure.
You're never going to have full closure.
Sure. But I don't know. I feel like a lesser film would have tried to find that closure. And I think he allows himself to be open while still being cinematic and controlled in what he's trying to do and say. And I think that's just a sign of a great filmmaker. And
if I'm being honest, to me, I want the Spielberg movie of like after this movie, or even like part of the epilogue moving into it. Because to me, the stuff I love about Spielberg's story is the Jaws stuff. It's dual. It's like, I want that movie next. I know it's not going to happen, but like, I don't know. I just find Spielberg's 20s to be such a fascinating time because those stories are so rich in the spirit of innovation and hard work. And this movie has that, obviously, but all I'm saying is Fabelman's cinematic universe. Let's do it. But no, I genuinely, I want an actual like Spielberg True Blue. Like I want some kind of like dive because of Jaws.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at some point we get the making of Jaws. Same way I imagine at some point we'll get the making of the first Star Wars movie. It's just,
we have stuff like that already.
Sure.
It's more to me like the thread of Spielberg's trajectory as a director, because like, yeah, again, I think like the story, like the duel of it all is just such an interesting, no one expected that movie to be as good as it was. They gave it to Spielberg. It was a TV movie, and he suddenly found a way to elevate the TV movie to such an interesting degree. And now the TV movie, the Netflix movie as it were, is trouncing the Fabelmans at the box office. What a turn of events.
Well, I mean, not only that, but like, like we said, he's the creator of what we define as the blockbuster and the blockbuster season. And that whole, movie system kind of ate this movie whole. And so he's kind of, being eaten by the whale of his own creation in some respect or another.
Right. He tried so hard, to break out of that blockbuster box that he put himself in. I don't think that he's really put himself fully into a blockbuster, like really wanted to make it something special since War of the Worlds, maybe?
Kingdom of the Crystal
was his heart in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? I don't think so. Ready Player One, he couldn't care less. Is West Side Story a blockbuster? Nah.
I'd say probably.
It's edging.
I mean, that's the thing is that like I don't. I mean, I'm sure he would have loved if this movie, made all the money in the world, but I feel like he's not really expecting this to be, like one of his highest grossing films. If he wanted to just make a high grossing film, he just would have made that fit the Indiana Jones movie that James Mangold's making. Like, I think he deliberately chose to make this movie because he wanted to find that, you know, he's reached those heights already. He's gotten there. He's gotten those Oscars. If he gets an Oscar for this or not, I don't know if that's like the most important thing. I think the fact they made the film is the achievement that he's searching for.
I agree with that. And that is certainly, I think, to me, one of the driving things of his career. I just think that he wants to make all the movies that he never got a chance to make. You know, I think they were talking about this on the Blank Check podcast. You know, like that's where Spielberg is at, right? Like, and that's why like Ready Player One felt like such a weird blip. It's like, why make that movie? You know, to me, West Side Story, he always wanted to make a musical. Perfect opportunity. And he did a really good job with it. I think the limitations with West Side Story had a lot to do with like the source material. That's a tough thing to adapt. It's a downer of a movie. And then, of course, this, where I just think he's always wanted to make this kind of personal film. I know he has a bunch of stuff in the tank. He's said it before. He has all kinds of other movies he's always wanted to do. And he has an opportunity to do it pretty soon. So
yeah, I mean,
he can do whatever he wants.
Well, the big one he wants to do is he still wants to do a Western, which makes sense given the ending of this film.
Yeah.
But I think the next one he's going to do is a Bullet film with Bradley Cooper. I think that's been announced as his next project, which also feels kind of odd for, you know, coming off of the Fabelmans, but he can do whatever he wants to do. You
know what kind of Spielberg movie I think would kick? Do like a Tarantino-esque movie, Spielberg. Just do it.
Okay.
Just to see if you can.
What kind of like a
capture it if you can. Movie? Well, kind of like a Grindhouse, kind of like a Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs kind of thing.
Okay.
He could do it. You don't think so?
It's not that I don't think he can or can't. I just don't quite follow
like
this train of thought.
A gritty crime thing with a lot of cussing.
Yeah. Well, I do love Munich, which is a lot grittier and harder than his other films. And I kind of would love if he went back to like making something just so adult.
Yeah.
And
another Tony Kushner. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Was that the first of their collaborations together?
Good question.
Is that West Side Story in this?
Minority Report they didn't. Huh.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think you're right. But okay. Will Ashton. It's time for the Rotten Tomatoes game. You knew it was coming. And this could be a tough one. Could be an easy one. Let's find out. Will Ashton, we have 213 reviews counted for this movie so far. Fewer than Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery. But what say you? What do you think the critical score is on this?
I think it's high. I think most people, most critics, I mean, are probably enjoying the film, though maybe not as much as like the overwhelmingly positive response to West Side Story and maybe a few other Spielberg movies. I could see based on the reaction, some people are a little bit more critical of the film, but not enough to tank it altogether. I'm going to say 87%.
Way off.
Way off too high or way off too low?
Too low.
Too low. Okay.
It is the same as Glass Onion.
93%.
93%.
Oh.
We have a double 93 on the show this week, but could it be a quadruple? Because we had double 93s for Glass Onion for audience score. What about the audience score for the Fabelmans? Well, we have 250 plus verified ratings. What do you got?
I'm going to say 81%.
That's actually really close. You're one off. Are you too low, though, or are you too high?
I think I'm a little too low. I'm going to say 82%. There
you go. Got it. 82%. And I kind of get it. I think like it is a long movie. And it is, I could see some people kind of watching it and being a little bit like, it's not the best. I certainly came out of it like that. But yeah, I'm double checking. Yeah, it's 151 minutes. So yeah, also like Glass Onion, 2 hours and, well, this is a little longer, 2 hours and 30 minutes. Glass Onion was 200, my gosh, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I can't talk. But okay, what about cinema score? Will, what do you think the cinema score is for this one? We do have it.
A B?
No. Higher.
Higher. Okay. A minus?
Higher.
A plus?
No, A.
A, okay.
You went too high. That's interesting though, right? Because I would have probably guessed like a B plus or A minus based on the 82%. But no, I mean, the folks in Vegas were like, this is cinema. So there you go.
He's just like us, taking a bet on life, baby. Following his dreams.
Yeah. All right, we'll finish off with Letterboxd. Now on Letterboxd.com, far fewer than Glass Onion have logged it. Glass Onion were the 80,000s. Yep. This is 27,000. Makes sense. It hasn't been seen nearly as much. However, Will, unlike Glass Onion, this is in the top 250 of Letterboxd ratings-wise. Not only that, it's one of the highest rated we've talked about all year. It's 174. Now, we've talked about, I think, everywhere all once. That's way higher, but that's like the exception. So that's surprising, isn't it? What do you think, though? Because Letterboxd, I mean, it's a website built for Spielberg fans, let's be honest.
Yeah.
0 to 5, what's the average rating in your guess?
It's a 4.5?
That's a bit too high. I get why you would guess that high, because, just look at that score. Look at that 174. It's a bit lower, though. It's 4.2. But 4.2, that's still a lot higher than we normally get to, yeah.
No fibbing. I was going to guess 4.2, but then you were talking all this like it's one of the highest grossing or highest rated movies.
Don't listen to me, Watch.
And I was like, dang, it must be higher than that. Like, and I was thinking like, oh, I guess it's like 4.5, but no, I guess I should have gone with my initial guess.
Yeah, my plan worked. And you know what's funny? Despite having so low of a view count, way more people I know watched on Letterboxd than Glass Onion. I'm seeing it all over the place. We have friends of the show who watched it, loved it. Kimber Myers, Emma Sasick, they give it really high scores. But, we did have Isaac Feldberg, our buddy, who gave it 2 stars. I don't know if you saw this. I know Isaac, he loves to stir the pot a little bit. He's one of my favorite contrarians. You want me to read Isaac Feldberg's review, Alashin? Can you stand it?
No, I was actually curious to hear what he had to say about it.
Here's what he said. Spielberg, disguising his hack work as his most deeply personal story, a la Branagh's Belfast, The Fabelmans reshapes a populist filmmaker's origins into an archetypal coming-of-age story in a manner that, to risk being reductive, plays like cutting crusts off his sandwiches. Outside of bludgeoning the audience to death with its core themes, expounded upon in embarrassing and gratingly on-the-nose speeches written by Tony Kushner with Oscar acting reels in mind, the film retains such emotional distance from the reality of his characters that they resemble either figments or cartoons scene to scene, and move the film's reflections on sacrifice, self-possession, and the cinema as a means of seeing oneself into a vague yet on-the-nose space, i.e., one too emotionally bald and narratively nebulous to be of use. Yeah, there's a little bit more to go off of here, but I think you get the idea. I highly disagree with this review. But, that's his right. There you go. And some people commented on it, and they were just sort of like, thank you. I feel like I'm the only one who, found this underwhelming. But, that's the cinema, baby. That's the game.
That is the cinema. I will always respect Isaac's opinion, whether I agree with it or not.
Same.
I will always respect what he has to say. In this case, I can't say.
Even when I disagree, I know he's being true to himself, and yeah, I love him for it.
All right, well, is that our show?
That's it. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, it's gotten long. I gotta get to bed.
You're right. We got another 20 minutes in the tank. Just kidding.
If you want to keep talking, I'll keep talking. But I mean,
nah.
I'm ready to wrap it up.
Well, we will be back later this week, talk After Sun, maybe a couple other things. And as always, if you feel like we missed something that you really wanted to hear us talk about, we're always open to suggestions. We're just kind of winging it, let's be honest. Hit us up, email us, social media, whatever you want to do. It's in the show notes, links to how you can get in touch. Be sure to do that. But we'll be back soon for more reviews as usual. So from the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Lash.
See you next time.